ahead and record it.
Okay, got it.
I think it's 5:03 right now. How many attendees do you see?
Looks like 11, which is fine.
Okay. Let's go ahead and start our outreach event this evening. My name is Elizabeth Leibold. I work at the City of Tucson. I do have some feedback. Please remember to put yourself on mute if you can during our presentation today. I work at the City of Tucson in the Department of Transportation and Mobility with Floodplain Administration and Stormwater Management. And I am the City of Tucson CRS coordinator. Tonight we will have one of two outreach events. If you can't make the entire session tonight, you can join us for May 25th in the morning, and we'll have the same presentation on May 25th. Tonight we're talking about flood insurance in the Tucson area. We welcome you to the Tucson area second annual flood insurance webinar. Both state offices and local agency floodplain management are here to help you and with your flood insurance questions and flood and erosion hazard concerns. Our goal is at the City of Tucson is to help reduce flood and erosion hazards, reduce damage and associated costs. And I'm going to need to close my office door. I'm sorry, I'm getting some noise here, sorry. Thank you for your patience. So part of the information that we're going to go over tonight is regarding lowering your risk and lowering your flood-related costs. And so we'll start with talking about flood and erosion hazard risk and other hazards related to storm events. And then we'll talk about the different types of floodplain zones. We're going to talk about how you can reduce your risk, what the city and local municipalities are doing to reduce risk. We'll include some other information, and then we'll go to our town of Marana and town of Sahuarita, and they'll provide some contact information. And then we'll go to County Regional Flood Control District, who will be talking about risk rating 2.0. We'll have questions and answers after each speaker, and we'll also be having the state talk to us about Floodsmart.gov and other resources. If you have any questions, please post it in the chat box. And then also we can go over your questions after each speaker. Please keep your audio on mute for consideration of the presenters. Thank you. Our presenters today are, again, myself from the City of Tucson. Gus Myers is another engineer at the town of Marana. And Nalo Vale, sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. He's also a civil engineer. He works in the Public Works Office at the town of Sahuarita. Joe Cafari is program manager at Pima County Regional Flood Control District. And Erin Klug is our assistant director from the state, and she works in the Arizona Department of Insurance and Financial Institutions. Tucson is unique. We do experience approximately 7 to 8 inches of rain in the summer monsoon, about 3 to 4 inches in the winter season. California gets about 3 inches in the winter, and that in the southern California area, to give you a comparison of the amount of water that we actually receive in Tucson. During the monsoon, convective clouds can form, and those are called chubascos. There's larger thunderstorm systems that will come up the Sierra Cortez or from other directions, and those can also bring very heavy rains. Flooding is an excess of water on the land that's normally dry, affecting 2 or more acres of land or 2 or more properties. Some of the different types of hazards that occur in our area can include all weather access, clogging of our storm drain systems that can lead to blockages, obstruction, and diversion of flow. We also see quite a few swiftwater rescues, and there's concerns about stormwater quality. Encroachment is an issue when there's too much development in an area and floodwaters are pushed to the side or water surface elevations are elevated. We also have flash flooding conditions, quite a few reports of flooding in homes and other businesses. Lightning can cause fires and also cause problems with utility poles, and this can lead to loss of service or temporary energy loss. We also have issues with ponding waters, and we try to avoid mosquito-borne illnesses by detention systems rather than retention. Our floodplain management plan is frequently renewed every 5 years for a formal update. You can find the latest report on the City of Tucson Floodplain Administration webpage. FEMA administers the National Flood Insurance Program, and the program provides flood insurance program, and it also creates maps that establish FEMA flood-prone areas and development regulations. The NFIP uses the community rating system to provide each community that participates a certain number of credits for the types of activities that we do. For instance, we do drainage maintenance, floodplain use permitting, outreach, mapping updates, warning systems, and other activities that gives us credits. And then those credits equate to a certain class number. So class 1 is the best. For instance, some years ago, the city of Tulsa received a class 1, and you might ask, well, why would they get a class 1? Well, they had a warning system that was really well done for tornado warning. Also, I'd like to note that the Pima County Regional Flood Control District CRS coordinator Greg Sachs recently upped the class for the county unincorporated from a class 5 to class 3 I just wanted to recognize that achievement that provides extra discounts for unincorporated county property owners that have flood insurance policies. And what Greg's work has done is helped other communities to further protect and lower flood risk. The types of discounts that can be achieved with the program range from 5% to 45% in a reduction of the flood insurance premiums, depending on your class rank. Currently, the city of Tucson is a class 6. That provides a 20% discount. If you're living outside of a flood area, flood risk area, you can also buy flood insurance. It doesn't matter whether you're in a flood zone or not, you still are able to purchase flood insurance. There are generally two types of floodplain areas that are regulated. The FEMA, or the special flood hazard areas, are mapped on those FEMA maps. The local jurisdictions may also have local regulatory flood zone areas that are mapped. You can talk to your flood insurance agent to get a quote on what your flood insurance policy might look like. Please check with your local city engineering staff to check your flood status and get to understand the different hazards, such as erosion hazards and your flood zone. Other information can include rebates on water harvesting systems. Always remember that new walls and fences do require a permit. It is important to get a permit for wall or fence because these structures may need wall openings to make sure that the fence is elevated above the 100-year flood zone to allow conveyance of floodwaters. Otherwise, your fence or wall could divert flow, and you don't want to be liable to that type of a hazard. The different types of flood zones are low risk or X shaded zones on the FEMA maps, medium risk, those are the X shaded areas, and A zones, which are high risk areas. In the city of Tucson, we have floodways that are the highest and most restrictive types of flood zones. And then there's also AE zones, A zones, AO1, AO3, and AH. These are different types of flood zones for ponding or other high-risk areas. The city of Tucson low-risk zones include the X unshaded and 500-year flood zones. Check with your staff on the type of flood zone that you might be within. Municipal floodplain use permitting is required for local and FEMA floodplain development. So please make sure you're checking with staff. Remember, fences and walls need permits. So for local floodplain considerations, sudden storms, it can occur anywhere in the city of Tucson. Municipal and local flood areas may not require flood insurance, but could still be at risk. Over a third of the policies in the city of Tucson are actually not in the high-risk FEMA flood zone, but in the X zones, as some of the property owners choose to purchase the flood insurance, even though flood insurance is only required when there's a federally backed loan for the mortgage of the structure from the lender. The lender will require the flood insurance proof if you're in those high-risk flood zones. The community does various activities to help reduce risk. They may have floodplain ordinances that are updated. These ordinances include restrictions that limit and prohibit certain types of development in the flood-prone areas. If we lessen the amount of development in the flood zone, then the community has less risk. There's many structures that are older than our first flood maps. So there's a lot of non-conforming pre-mapped structures. There's different things that the community can assist those types of property owners with for flood proofing and other floodplain considerations. Building codes and floodplain management plans, all these types of community work helps to reduce flood and erosion hazards. The floodplain management plans help identify the hazards and promote information sharing and help to work on and identify and prioritize action items. And in some areas, the community can purchase flood-prone properties. The county has a program called FLAP. It's a flood acquisition program that helps us property owners consider selling their property, and that property can be used for flood protection or other open space recreational areas. Keep in mind that building coverage as well as content coverage is available for flood insurance. There's different things that you can do to be prepared for flooding. You can look up this information in our websites that are available to you at our Floodplain Administration website, or look up Be Prepared or Floodsmart.gov. I wanted to touch briefly on levees. The communities are working on different types of developing levee emergency responses during a levee breach. And there are several areas in the city of Tucson where Floodplain Administration will be contacting these subdivisions to work with them on an emergency response plan for evacuation. We also have developed emergency response plans with our hazard mitigation plans and emergency management. There's an opportunity for individuals to join My Alerts. If you go to the Pima County Regional Flood Control District website, there's a way to join the county's warning system. We work to update our flood map data so we can identify flood stage conditions. So when there's a flood condition, warning systems can provide information on how to evacuate, and it also assists with emergency response. I think we've gone over this. We're talking about the different types of X zones. There's 500-year flood zones that are restricted for critical infrastructure, as well as 100-year zones. There's shallow flooding condition under 1 foot of depth. And there's also areas protected by levees. There's other things that the city does to help reduce flood risk. We have a sandbag program, Operation Splash, where the city puts up barricades at dip crossings. And as mentioned, we have critical infrastructure planning underway. There's also opportunities for disaster, flood disaster monies, funding, as well as applying for pre-flood or mitigation grants. City is actively applying for those grants. Keep in mind that if you keep your area clear around your building structure, it will help reduce the amount of fuel for fires that could be started from lightning. You can sign up for that alert system at myalerts.pima.gov. This is just a photo of the Rito in 2006. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of National Flood Insurance Program. In 2012, the Biggert Waters Flood Insurance Reform Act came about, and it attempted to adjust the premium rates to provide more equitable premiums throughout, or more fairly for the type of risk. And in 2014, it was revised to adjust some of the premiums, because the premiums were adjusted a little bit too quickly, I guess, in the 2012 Biggert Waters Act. So the Affordability Act in 2014 provided a scaled system. And then more recently, we have Risk Rating 2.0, which Joe at the county will discuss further. Just to touch base, some of our water courses do have soil cement bank protection. However, not all of these systems of the regional water courses are protected to what we call the regulatory 100-year event. Some are only protecting to the 50-year storm. Please check with your engineering staff on your flood status. MLS has information about flood insurance and municipal flood requirements. And the city of Tucson has contact information, provides information on final plats that might have drainage easement information. We also have FEMA flood insurance study reporting that provides various water surface elevation to 100-year and 500-year elevations. We might have elevation certificates, and we should have all elevation certificates, and of course, flood status information. And you can look up this information at City of Tucson, PDSD, Planning and Development Services Department, floodplain information. Elevation certificate requests can be made by sending in self-addressed stamped envelope. You can find this information again at City of Tucson, floodplain information. Keep in mind that post-fire conditions can cause sediment transport that can take away conveyance area of floodwaters and change conveyance and floodplain mapping. The Pima County Flood Control District has a website. You can look at some projected new floodplain data from the recent fires in the Catalina Mountains. A 30-day waiting period exception may apply, but meaning that the 30-day is not required as like typical flood insurance policies. However, keep in mind that the fire must be declared completed or contained rather before the flood insurance policy can be used. So even though the 30-day waiting period may not apply to those types of post-fire conditions, the fire must be in contained status. More information can be seen at City of Tucson Floodplain Administration. This PowerPoint will be made available later for your reference so you can look up these links. I now have City of Tucson, or sorry, Town of Marana floodplain information, and I'm going to go ahead and bring up that PowerPoint for you.
Okay. And okay, next page. Let's go to the third one and I'll start from there. Good evening. My name is Gus Myers. I'm the Development Engineering Manager for the Town of Marana, and I'm also the interim flood CRS representative for the town. This slide is showing you, here's our phone number, contact us at, our email, and we floodplain information to realtors, the general public, contractors, anybody who needs it. We give them the information. We perform floodplain status for realtors and other people who want to know where their house sits, what type of floodplain they're in. We do a lot of review of construction in the floodplain and doing the permitting for floodplain use permits and elevation certificates. And our department provides technical assistance to the general community and to our other departments. So for planning for building in the floodplain, we know that flooding is a natural occurrence, and we ask that you contact the Development Engineering Division to go ahead and start talking to us about your project, where it is, what you want to do, and we can start providing you some guidance on that. Next, please. Okay, so if you're going to build in the floodplain or in the erosion hazard setback, the town of Marana is going to require you to provide us with it or apply for a floodplain use permit. If it is a habitable structure, we will require a floodplain use permit, or I'm sorry, an elevation certificate once you're underway. Our construction for the floodplain is covered under the town code. You can find town code and floodplain requirements by going to the maranaaz.gov website and clicking on engineering, and that will take you to development engineering, and under that will be floodplain. Next, please. If you're going to set a manufactured home in the floodplain, please understand you need to come to the town before you go to the state of Arizona. We will assist you in getting your floodplain use permit set up so you can go to the state of Arizona, and Department of Housing will then do your permitting, but you will have to get your floodplain use permit from the town first. And the foundation standards is available from Arizona Department of Housing. And these are the bare minimum standards that people can use rather than going and having to hire an engineer. So they're just standards, and we discuss them with you, find out what the right one for you is, and get you moving up towards the state to get your new home set. Next, please. Next. Elizabeth, you there? Thank you. Okay, so where can you get flood insurance and floodplain information? You get it by calling the town. 520-382-2600, please, and ask for floodplain, or the number up here on the top of your on the top of our slide here. We have floodplain managers on staff that can help you with your floodplain information questions and point you in the right direction. The town does participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. I believe we are a Class 7 or a Class 8 community at this point. We have earned our residents a 15% reduction on their floodplain insurance, which helps. And property owners with any structures in the special flood hazard area who have a mortgage are probably going to get a note from their bank that they need to carry floodplain insurance, and we can help work with your agent to get those issues settled real quickly. And again, please, we really encourage the general public, if you have questions, please call the town of Marana and talk to one of our floodplain managers. Next, please. Elevation certificates. Elizabeth did a good job in covering them, and I'm going to hit them again because they are a problem with some folks. So if your property is located in a floodplain, a special flood hazard area, and you want to build a habitable structure, you will be required to give us an elevation certificate. The elevation certificate is completed by a registered land surveyor or an engineer. The town does not accept AO1 do-it-yourself elevation certificates. And we need to have them completed and delivered before we'll turn over a certificate of occupancy or more building inspections. We do not do or perform elevation certificate work, but we do maintain a list that we will be glad to share with you of people who do work here locally and know the system. And last but not least on this one, we maintain a copy of all the elevation certificates we can get returned to us. So you might check, if you need an elevation certificate, check with the town because we may have one on file and that may save you some money. Next, please. And this is the resources, phone number for the Town of Marana Development Engineering, Pima County Flood Control, because often we do get calls from folks that are outside of our corporate boundaries and we help them, but it's Pima County's jurisdiction. Arizona Department of Housing, that's their website with all their information for setting manufactured houses in a floodplain. And NFIP and U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the ready.gov/floods. And that's a really good website to get general questions on flood-related issues, floodplain insurance, and elevation certificates and what they are. And with that, next slide, and we're done. Thank you. You have any questions? We're here to answer them.
I'm going to check our chat box. At this time, it doesn't look like we have any questions. So we're going to go to our next speaker. That's Nalo Valo. Oh, I'm sorry. Nalo Nalavale from the town of Swarita.
Thank you for your help, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Gus. Appreciate it. Very good presentation. It looks like Nalo was not able to join. And he said he was only allowed to, would be only available for a portion of the presentation. So I'll just go ahead and share the rest of my PowerPoint. I think I've got some information on Swarita. Let's see. I don't know where that is, well, the town of Suarita does have a web page, and you'll look for the Public Works page on the town of Suarita's website, and you can call the phone number that's there, and it looks like we've got a link there in our chat box if you have information. And their phone number is 520-344-7109. And that goes directly to NALO. Our next speaker is Joe Cafari with Pima County Regional Flood Control District.
All right.
Joe.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Elizabeth. All right. Thank you all. I'm going to try to share my screen here. I never know how that works on a laptop. All right. Can you guys see that PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Well, thank you all again for attending. I want to give a special shout out to, we have our FEMA Region 9 representative who has joined us this evening. She has been invaluable resource for all of our needs in helping to understand what risk rating is. And because of her, we're able to give you this presentation tonight. So I'm going to give you a overview here of Risk Rating 2.0. The tagline that FEMA is using is called Equity in Action. And that means that property owners will no longer pay more than their share in premiums based on the value of their home. So essentially what that means is, to boil it down, higher valued homes, so those mansions with all the marble, are going to pay more flood insurance costs than a manufactured home that's built in the 70s and was falling apart already. So it's trying to spread that equity around, making flood insurance more affordable for those people who need it. This was a massive overhaul, long time coming, and this went into effect October 1st, 2021 for all new policyholders, and then really went into effect just a couple weeks ago, April 1st, 2022 for all renewing policyholders. I was just in a national conference today and got these statistics that as of October 2021, there's been 509,000 renewed policies under this new rating system. So this is definitely in effect. It's not going anywhere, as FEMA has told us. So this is how flood insurance will be priced, and we'll get into what goes into that. So as our good friend Jerry Seinfeld always says, what's the deal? So through their new pricing methodology, FEMA will better inform individuals and communities about the flood risk individual to those properties and promote actions to mitigate against them. So where were we before this? So back in 2021, there were about 5 million flood insurance policies across the nation in force, which accounted for $1.3 trillion in coverage. As Elizabeth and Gus have mentioned, us flood control communities are part of what's called the community rating system. So based on actions that we do at the local level, there's a direct correspondence in potentially lowering flood insurance costs for people. So across the nation, these flood control districts, about 75% of the eligible communities participate in that, which is pretty good. This new pricing methodology in Arizona, there's about 25% estimated policies to decrease, about 68% to basically remain the same, and then really only about 7% to go up on average, about $10 per month. So in general, policy should stay about the same. It's spreading that equity around. and then potentially seeing about 25% reduction. This is based on the 2018 Affordability Framework, which essentially states that lower income earners live in high hazard areas. And how does Congress, how does FEMA, how do floodplain managers combat this? That's what risk rating is really trying to answer. We're not going to go through all of this, so don't be scared. But David Bowie is talking about changes. And so what is changing under this new premium system? It's really tailored to help the insurance agents. So it wants to simplify that quote process. Let's get that flood insurance quote to the policyholder a lot quicker and a lot more effectively. A big change, which we'll get into, is eliminating the mandatory requirement for elevation certificates. A huge change is expanding that CRS discount to all floodplains. So previously, you would only get that major discount if you were in a FEMA recognized floodplain. But now this expands that out to all parts of the jurisdiction. So that's 35% for Pima County, 20% discount for City of Tucson, 15% for Marana. Replacement cost value is being taken into account. So we know that in, floods only damage a certain number of feet of the house. Rarely you see a home, get really washed away. So that replacement cost value, what it would cost to replace that portion of the home, is being taken into account instead of the full cash value of the structure. Again, this kind of spreads the equity around, because if you live in a mansion and you get damaged, you have to replace marble and, quartz and, some other stuff. Whereas in a manufactured home, it may only be wood and CMU piers and, some concrete. So looking at that cost differential and that replacement cost value. What is not changing, Congress is, we have to live by what Congress says. And so they put a federal law on rate caps, which is about 18%. We're still getting those discounts. They've actually been expanded. The use of the flood insurance rate maps for mandatory purchase. So if you live in a FEMA special flood hazard area and you have a mortgage, you are required to get flood insurance with that structure. That's not changing. And of course, surcharges. You got to hit them, a couple other times just in case. What's being phased out is just kind of those, those preferred risk policies and the grandfathered rates. So it's converting everybody to that new system. What goes into that quote? So we're looking at two different factors. There's the rating variables and then the building variables. So rating is really the key source from what I've gathered. Rating variables. So the distance to the flooding source is going to be what's really driving that flood insurance cost. So how close are you to that flooding source? And then what is your elevation of the finished floor related to that flooding source? So how high do you sit above that threat, that risk? Those are really the two key factors of what goes into that price. For the building variables, we talked about that replacement cost value. Looking at the construction type, wood versus masonry, there's two different costs for those replacements. And then the foundation type, which we'll get into a little bit. And do you have any mitigation credits? Are your machinery and electrical equipment elevated to a certain elevation? Do you have flood openings to allow for water to pass through so it doesn't get inundated? You get some credits based off of that. So the data analysis, to continue, FEMA is using what's called CoreLogic. They're a private company that's been contracted with FEMA, and they essentially use computers. It's all in the computer these days, to determine what your finished floor elevation is related to that flooding source. As a floodplain manager, we've been asking FEMA to get some information from CoreLogic. We're told that information is not available right now for testing, but it's something that we're actively looking into. Let's talk a little bit about this elevation certificate. So previously, you would have been required to submit an elevation certificate to show that finished floor elevation. Now, CoreLogic is replacing that step. You can still submit an elevation certificate to help refine CoreLogic's models. The good thing about that is that you will not get punished for doing so. So if you provide that elevation certificate and you actually get a higher premium, you can still go back to that lower premium from CoreLogic. So it really doesn't hurt to get that elevation certificate. And as Gus and Elizabeth stated, reach out to the jurisdiction. We may have one on file, or we can help you get one. Looking again at this, so the elevation of the structure relative to the flooding source, that's determined by what's called the local relative elevation. So what the models are using is taking the center of that structure, going out 500 meters squared and looking at the lay of the land. So if your structure, if that center point sits higher than the average of the lay of the land, you will be rated, with a better policy. But if, you sit below that average, you're going to be rated at a higher risk. So it's looking at that area of the flood hazard. There's various ratings for first floor height. Really, in Arizona, we don't see too much of these. What we're primarily looking at is slab on grade, a basement, or a crawl space if you have a manufactured home. Those other situations on the right-hand side there really is what we're seeing on the coastal communities, the New Jerseys, Florida, California areas. So just some examples of the first floor heights there. Like I mentioned before, and in talking with our FEMA representative, this really seems to be what is the driving force for that flood insurance pricing, is the elevation of the structure related to the flooding source. And then it's the distance to the flooding source and the replacement cost value. That flooding source is based on the National Hydrography Data Set version 2+, which I'll show you in a second. So that's where FEMA's using that's what FEMA's using to get their information. For floodplain management purposes, there's what's called letter of map revision and letter of map amendments. Essentially, that is a way for homeowners to prove that their property sits higher and outside of the floodplain. So think of it as an island in the ocean. One of those desert islands in the ocean out there. What that does for flood insurance pricing is it gets you out of that mandatory requirement. Which is a good, if you don't want flood insurance, it's a good thing. So it gets you out of that flood insurance requirement. But the risk is still there. So you still may be rated at a premium as if your house was still in that floodplain. It's a little confusing to try to explain, but really that letter of map revision can get you out of that mandatory purchase requirement. So what you may spend in building costs and hiring an engineer to prove that you're not in the floodplain potentially could be saved in that flood insurance. In general, flood insurance costs about $15 per $1,000 of coverage. If you own, a $30 million mansion, I think the maximum amount of insurance you could pay is $12,125 if you maxed everything out. So I just thought that was a fun little fact to put in there. Talking about that hydrography data set, this is what Pima County, Tucson, Marana, this is what we're looking at on that right-hand side, and then drilled down onto that left-hand side. So that homeowner standing on his roof in the flooded portion, which would be the Tucson mountains right there. What the system's going to do is look at where that structure is related to the nearest streamline or the nearest polygon, which represents the risk, the floodplain risk. So that's really kind of what it's based on there. We talked about that CRS credit. So I can only speak to Pima County specifically on this one, but Pima County just went to a Class 3 community, which is a huge deal. It puts us in the top 1% of the nation. We got a lot of points from doing presentations like this to you all. So again, thank you for attending. Because of that rating modification, we went to a 35% reduction. We previously had a 25%. We're estimating that that's going to save about $1 million in flood insurance costs for Pima County residents because of that and because of the risk rating impacts on our community. This is kind of a zip code breakdown that FEMA gave to us. I just took a snippet of it. They had this, all for Arizona, but this is kind of what we're looking at. So if you, you can kind of drill down. If you look at 85705, you can see that 42 policies are expected to decrease over $100, and kind of go through that. So kind of a useful tool as that helps floodplain managers visualize some areas that they can focus on for outreach efforts or notifying the constituents of what they could expect. I'm gonna run through these pretty quickly here, just in the interest of time and keeping things not getting underwater, so to speak, with these in depth with all this. We've had a couple of case studies where homeowners have given us their insurance costs. We've been able to drill down into them a little bit. So this is out kind of on Catalina Highway, which is leading up to Mount Lemon. This property, you can see some of the details there. Their full coverage is $3,300, and that's primarily driven because they're located next to a major flooding source within 300 feet from the main wash channel. It is a pretty substantial house. They're rated at over $600,000 for their replacement cost value. CoreLogic gave them first floor height of 0.3, which we feel is fairly accurate for what it is. Again, this was built prior to floodplain regulations, so an older home. This one is within the city of Tucson. It's located next to the Rito River and Swan Road, so pretty urban area. This is really the one that kind of drove a lot of the questions that we had and why we reached out to our FEMA representative. This one is in a bank protected area, so they're not required to get flood insurance. If the Rito River were to overflood, they may be impacted by this Zone X shaded floodplain. It's a low hazard area. Just a normal subdivision house. They were rated at almost $5,000. We were kind of taken aback by this. And in talking with FEMA and our representative, now we kind of understand why it's rated this high. Again, it's that distance to the flooding source, and then it's their elevation above that flooding source. This is what it is. Bank protection, which we have all throughout Pima County, is not taken into account currently. That's something that's a major sticking point and something that we really want to get changed at the federal level. This homeowner says that rightly so, he's not going to renew his flood insurance policy. He went from about $300 up to $5,000. Not going to happen. So just an example there. This is a manufactured home, Zone A floodplain, kind of the southwest portion of the area. They're rated at about $3,000 for that. Again, we were taken aback, but then looking at the issues, that distance to the flooding source, 438 feet, is pretty close. They could expect to be impacted. Here's one where I wanted to show one that's definitely outside of the flood hazards. Their full cost would be $615. But they're still not going to get flood insurance because they sit a lot higher than any of the nearest flooding sources. So this is the cost breakdowns. We won't get too much into them. But again, this led to a lot of our questions. What is the reserve fund assessment you can see that there's $736 surcharge tacked onto one of them. And so we reached out to FEMA, and they were very gracious and provided some questions. So that reserve fund assessment is what's called a catastrophic flood event reserve fund. So essentially, the way we understand it, and not to be pessimistic about it, but it's one of those things where Arizona residents are paying for catastrophic events on East Coast communities. Whether that's equitable or not, that's not really our determination to call, but it's something that's kind of sticking out to us that we want to fight for our residents for. And then, like we talked about, what is the distance to the flooding source? We got that information that we've talked about so far here. Some other case studies some outliers that we saw, and good to know. We noticed that there's this circled surcharge here of $250. All the other ones were $25. This is because this is not the primary residence. This is listed as a rental property. So if it's a rental, it's $250 that we saw here. Again, that core logic, that 3.1, actually is fairly accurate. This residence is owned by someone in our office, and we went out there with him. We went to the property and measured, and it came in at about 3 feet. So we're happy with what core logic is putting out so far. Another example, this is a zone AE, so it's a special flood hazard area. The cost for this is $2,500. What I wanted to show with this is that the property owner actually had an elevation certificate that she had gotten done a couple years ago. The elevation certificate showed that she is actually below the floodplain. So this is another one of those houses that was built in the 70s, actually late 60s, not built to flood prone requirements. So this would be an example where she would have submitted the elevation certificate. Risk rating would have given her the lower way to go. And so she got that way to go. She just renewed her policy in February 2022, and it was reduced about $1,000 from her previous quote. And we don't exactly know why. This is with a USAA bank is the one who's writing the policy, so we can't get too much information from them. But she's kind of happy. So her full coverage was $2,500 as the quote, and then she's getting about $1,000 off. So good on her for that. I'm starting to wrap up here, but I just want to give some highlights. I was at the National Flood Association Conference, which was held in Scottsdale, and they really put a focus on flood insurance and getting agents and floodplain managers involved. So kind of an overview of that. Let's define what equity is. Is it social, or is it economic? Is it cultural? Let's be clear on what that is. Who really needs flood insurance is really something that FEMA is trying to get a hold of, and Risk Rating 2.0 is designed to try and answer that question. FEMA's motto, so to speak, is where it can rain, it can flood. So everyone is in a floodplain. It just depends on your level of risk. What I was happy to see is that over 33,000 insurance agents have been trained to date on Risk Rating 2.0, but they still need more materials. Insurance agents are not floodplain management experts. And so the agents that we're talking to, they're having a pretty hard time of trying to understand what the information is. We're doing specific outreach, sitting with them, explaining it, telling them what to input. And FEMA's done a good job with getting information in their hands as well, but getting some additional data sheets to those agents is kind of a need right now. Some wants related to Risk Rating 2.0. It's, again, not to be pessimistic, and it's sad to say, but it's not taking into consideration anything that floodplain managers are seeing at the local level. And so there's this big national push right now to try to get some input from floodplain managers. Hey, we have this bank protection, or we've done these mitigation elements. There really is no threat to this property. How can we wrap that into your models? It's something that we hope the National Flood Insurance Program and FEMA really start listening to, because we want to advocate for the citizens of our communities. I mean, that's what our job essentially is. Let's protect the people and the public from the flood hazard. Let's see. We talked about the elevation certificate. Right now, you kind of need to be a registered land surveyor in order to understand a lot of the questions that are on there. For insurance purposes, property owners can fill out their own elevation certificates. So maybe we need to revise that LCERT to make it a little bit more easier, at least for insurance purposes. Today, I mentioned that I was part of a virtual national conference. And of course, the main topics were risk rating 2.0 and how that relates to the nation as a whole. I put a star there to what communities have been asking for over 2 years now. Let's have these work groups. Let's have some discussion. Risk rating was designed for insurance agents, but floodplain managers are the ones who have to deal with it on a day-to-day basis. We're the ones who get yelled at when people's policies start to increase, excuse me. So it was great to hear that there's the potential for some work groups in the future. And then, you know, we asked for revision to the elevation certificate. Maybe there could be some forms redesigned, you know, to push for that. And then having a tool to kind of do what if scenarios. You know, something that's basic for a property owner to just play around with before they get an actual quote. So they're a little bit more knowledgeable before they go in to speak with their insurance agent. I'm a positive person in general, so I want to end on some positivity here. What's great, at least on the insurance agent side, is that it's a standard web address to access the pricing portal. So it's not a software product. It's essentially a web app. So they could be out in the field, they could be out at a property, giving the property owner a quote right there. And it's very easy to do. It takes just about 5 minutes once you get in the swing of things. Pictures showing elevation methods and foundation types is big. I'm always confused as a floodplain manager of, is it a slab on grade? Does it have a basement? What is a crawl space? What's post piles and piers? There's actually pictures to help the insurance agent go through that with the client and say, hey, is this what your house looks like? Okay, so you must be elevated on a crawl space. So there's some great positivity going around there. This risk rating is fairly new. April 1st is when the full rollout took place. So we are actively seeking flood insurance policies from people. We're getting, Pima County is getting a lot of phone calls from people who are asking these questions. Unfortunately, I had one the other day. A lady had to walk away from a property that she almost had purchased. She could not afford the flood insurance. On top of, you know, inflation, on top of homeowners insurance, she just could not do it for her property. It was going to be about $3,000 a year. Single mom, you know, type of situation. And she was crying on the phone with me, but she was at least at ease that we're looking into this. We are aware of this, and she's hopeful that we can get some changes going as well. I know I went a little fast there. I wanted to kind of give you the brief overview, the brief highlights. I'm happy to stop sharing my screen. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you have in-depth questions that you want to get into, I'm happy to do that offline as well. I do see some questions here, so I'm going to go through the chat. Elizabeth mentioned elevation certificates for Tucson code. Correct. I should say for floodplain management purposes and building requirements, elevation certificates are still mandatory. It's just on that insurance side where it's not. And that's going to apply nationwide. Coverage limits are not changing. The maximum amounts for your building are 250,000 for the building and 100,000 for your contents coverage. Commercial correct is 500,000 for both. Would you say the new rating system makes the process for setting premiums for flood? So the question is, would you say that this new rating system makes the process for setting premiums for flood insurance more similar to other types of insurance? I would say yes. I'm not a auto insurance lender. I'm not a homeowner's insurance person. But from what the feedback I'm getting from the agents is that it is a very simple process now. And they're able to spit out those quotes very quickly. So I think it is easier. I think it defines a lot more than what you're going to get for coverage limits and what goes into the quotes. So I think it's a good tool for the agents. And those receiving rate increases will do so in a phased basis. That is correct. So if your policy is set to increase, Congress set statutory limits on that. So you won't jump up that full amount. You will be phased in. You will be on what's called a glide path to your full risk premium. So we're seeing that it's about 15% increases per year. And that's pretty much what I got. Gus, I think you have your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question. So how does this distance to the flooding source work when you're in something like an AO with sheet flood?
That's a great question. It's going to be based on that national hydrography data. And we're happy to share that with you. We don't know exactly what goes into that. We have our GIS person going into how those streamlines and how those polygons are determined. Is it based on the depth of flow? Is it based on discharge? Is it based on the frequency, the velocity? You know, what is that really based on? But I'm happy to get you that information and get you a kind of a screenshot of what Marana looks like.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Joe. That was excellent amount of information on risk rating 2.0. Keep in mind, there are differences, everybody, with flood insurance requirements and local code requirements for construction. So although it may sound like maybe we don't need elevation certificates, they may be required per the code for the actual physical construction requirements. I also wanted to point out that, excuse me, during my AFMA conference last week, we did have a speaker talking about risk rating 2.0, and they were mentioning, this was Bruce Bender, he mentioned that for the equity portion, it goes back to what Biggert Waters was attempting to do. There was different types of premium rates given for different properties, although they might have had similar flood risk. And the Biggert Waters was saying, hey, why is this person getting a discounted premium versus another person not? And so Biggert Waters was the first attempt to obtaining equity, I think. And so they were making changes to policies that were pretty drastic. And so, like I was saying, the Affordability Act in 2014 came in and was trying to say, hey, wait a second, let's try to attenuate those premium changes. And then risk rating 2.0, from what Bruce Bender was saying, my understanding was that the equity has to do with, again, making sure you're having a fair flood insurance policy for your risk. And so I just wanted to share that with what I had learned from the AFMA conference last week.
Yeah, thanks,
Next,
Elizabeth.
And thanks a lot, Joe. It's excellent information. Our next speaker is Aaron Klug with the state of Arizona. Aaron?
Hi, Elizabeth. I hope everybody can hear me. I'm not able to use I'm on my phone. So, and Elizabeth, I don't know if this is a question for Erica, but I'm not able to open the share tray. It looks like. Oh, wait, maybe I am. Hang on. Let's see if that worked. Are you seeing anything yet? Elizabeth?
Yes, your audio is good from my end, and I do see your presentation.
Oh, good. Okay. I can't tell that I'm sharing, so thank you for confirming that. Good evening, everybody. My name is Erin Klug, and I am with the Arizona Department of Insurance and Financial Institutions, or DIFI, as we refer to ourselves. So far, you've been hearing from your more local government representatives, cities and towns and county, and I'm with the state of Arizona. So I'm kind of your wrap up for this evening. You're going to hear a little bit of repeat information from me. I am not going to go into anywhere near the level of detail that the engineers talked to you about and that Joe talked to you about. But I would definitely suggest that if you took nothing else away from today's presentation, there just are amazing resources available to you in your local community to get information about flood insurance and flood risk. This is my second year doing this, and I am so impressed with the accessibility to your local government representatives to give you information and help with these really important issues. So I'm going to have some slides at the end of my presentation, just kind of bringing back some of the contact information and websites that you've seen already. But I would just remind you to just remember that you have those resources down there to help you. They're really, really quite remarkable. I'm going to start with just a little bit of a tiny overview of the Department of Insurance, because I think we only have about 15 minutes left. When I talk to people, I usually find that most people don't know that there is a state department that has anything to do with insurance. So I just want to very briefly tell you a little bit about the state agency and what we do. We are a regulatory agency, meaning that we license insurance companies and insurance agents who sell insurance. And we regulate all different kinds of insurance. Health insurance, homeowners insurance, auto insurance, and all sorts of commercial insurance, medical malpractice, workers' comp, business insurance, et cetera. There are insurance programs that we don't regulate, however. One of them, oddly enough, is flood insurance. And when I say that, what I mean is the flood insurance policies that you buy from the NFIP, from the National Flood Insurance Program. Now, we do still license the insurance agents that sell them, and we license and regulate the insurance companies that facilitate the availability of those policies and administer them, but we don't regulate the insurance itself. So I just wanted to put that little caveat out there. But in addition, the Department of Insurance, in addition to licensing all those entities, we monitor the financial health of insurance companies doing business in our state. We take consumer complaints. So if you do have complaints about various types of insurance, you can go to our website. I'll give you a link later. That's one, actually, it's at the bottom. There's an email address down there at the bottom. If you have questions, insurance-related questions, you can call those phone numbers if you want to ask questions as well. And then there is a complaint form, and that's later in my presentation as well. So anyhow, just a little bit about the state agency that's talking to you here. Just real quickly, again, I'm an Arizona native, and I was born and raised in Tucson, so I am delighted to be part of the Pima County presentation here. Couple of tidbits on flood and flood insurance that just to kind of reiterate the importance of this topic and to get people interested in thinking more about whether or not if you don't have flood insurance, or if you're worried about your flood risk, just a few more tidbits to get you thinking a little more deeply about it. So flood is among the most widespread of natural disasters in the U.S. and I don't think that even though I'm in Phoenix, but Tucson and Phoenix, even though we're in the desert, we are not immune to flood, of course. 25% of the NFIP claims are from flood zones that are not high risk. So that statistic always jumped out at me, that a significant portion of the NFIP claims are from people who are not in a high risk flood zone. Flooding is not just a river or an arroyo that overflows its banks. Flooding is any water, ground level water, that comes into your house and causes damage. Flooding can also include mudslides and landslides that cause damage and come into your home and cause damage. So, and flood damage is not covered by your standard homeowner's insurance policy or your renter's insurance policy. I think this fact is becoming better known by the public, and the NFIP and FEMA had some really good insurance, some good PSA and ads a few years ago that really kind of stressed that. But flood is not typically covered by your homeowners. Now, there are just a handful of private insurance companies that do sell endorsements that you can add to your homeowner's insurance policy. And there are insurance companies that sell excess flood insurance coverage. So coverage in excess of what the NFIP covers. So that $100,000 and $250,000 limit that Elizabeth had put in the chat, you can find companies who will sell excess coverage to that. So the $12 million mansion that Joe was mentioning, they definitely want some excess coverage, and they should be shopping for that. But your standard homeowner's policy does not cover flood. Elizabeth talked a lot about, so I'm not going to belabor it, but how wildfire increases the risk of flooding, because all of that good stuff on the mountainside that held things in place gets destroyed, and then water and mud and land flows down. So I think Joe said this too, every building is in a flood zone. It just depends on how much one. The risk varies. Some of you may have heard there was a pretty good NPR story, I think just last week, that highlighted this tool for the public. So I went and checked it out. It's riskfactor.com, and it is kind of risk modeling for both flood and fire. So it's kind of an easy to access, a quick place to check if you want to just put your zip code in there and see how it plays out for you. So it used to be pretty standard that if you were not in a high risk flood zone, that your flood insurance was probably going to cost notably less than your homeowner's insurance. For instance, I'm in an area that was not classified in Phoenix. I live in an area that was not classified as high risk, and my flood insurance prior to 2.0 rating was less than half of my homeowner's insurance premium. I'm waiting for my premium notice, my flood insurance premium notice, to find out if that's still true. But it's worth, if you're worried about flood risk and you don't know, then it's worth checking into to find out if if you're not required to have it by your mortgage company. It's worth checking into to see if it's something that's affordable to you. On that point, I did want to point out real quickly, this is not something that comes up frequently, but if you do have a mortgage on your home and you are in an area that requires flood insurance, if you let that flood insurance lapse, your lender will likely force place flood insurance. So, and that's probably a lot more expensive than flood insurance you would get on your own. So anyhow, I just wanted to point that out to folks. And we've already talked about the fact that flood insurance, the NFIP insurance, covers both your structure as well as your personal belongings. So just quickly, you saw a lot of websites listed today with a lot of different resources for you. I find that the Floodsmart.gov website is a really good starting point. I know Joe had some really good websites up in his materials too. But Floodsmart.gov, if you're new to this flood insurance stuff and you're just trying to get your feet wet, no pun intended. Maybe I did intend the pun.
That's funny.
You might want to check out Floodsmart.gov. One of the things you will find is a place to look up which insurance companies are active in the NFIP Direct program. And I'm going to click on that link in just a minute, but I want to tell you also that in addition to going to Floodsmart.gov to start your research, another good starting point is to call your homeowner's insurance company or agent and find out if they are an NFIP insurer. So if you go to Floodsmart.gov, you go up to the top and click Find a Provider, and then you're going to click on. Are you guys seeing this? Did my screen move to Floodsmart.gov?
Yeah, Erin, we see it. Looks good.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. Thanks. Thank you. So you just put Arizona, and I usually click over here and tell it I want to see all of them. And there are probably a couple of dozen insurance companies that are writing direct NFIP policies. But I will tell you that my company is not on this list. My homeowner's insurance company is not on this list, but I am a longtime customer of both the insurer and my agent. And when I called my agent to ask him about it, he said, "Oh, this was before risk rating 2.0, and it was much more laborious for him to get a policy and do the rating, and he did it for me anyhow." So you may find that your insurance agent is a good resource for you, and it's certainly good. If they can't do it, they'll let you know. But you can go to Floodsmart and look for companies that do if you want to shop on your own. This is just, one of our message points to the public is just to always check and make sure you're doing business with licensed insurance companies and licensed agents. And this is the website where you do that. Now I'm to the point in my slides where I'm just going to start repeating some of the wonderful resources you already saw on other people's slides, but just how to reach out to the other presenters, organizations, Pima County, City of Tucson, Town of Marana. These are phone numbers. And I didn't have an email for Marana, so I don't know if Gus wants to stick that. It was in his slides, but if you want to stick that in the chat, Gus.
I would if I knew how to get to the chat.
Oh, it's a little speech bubble at the bottom in the center if you want to. I bet Elizabeth can do it for you. And then these are some of the folks, these folks weren't on the presentation today, but these are other local communities down there and the websites for their flood specific resources. And I don't know, Elizabeth, I think you said you were going to be posting your slides, I presume, to your website. So if you'd like me to PDF my slides and send them to you, you can attach them to yours if you want. And,
yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and add Gus's phone number to the chat here. So if you have questions over in Marana, you can call Gus at this number.
Great.
I think that was it. Yeah. So congratulations to Pima County on going from 25 to 35% discount. That's pretty cool. Your residents will certainly benefit from that.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you very much. We're fingers crossed, hopefully going to the next class by November. So we'll see. We'll see.
Woohoo!
Yeah, we really appreciate having Pima County Flood Control District, Joe Cafari, attend our flood insurance meeting. And he always helps the city of Tucson out and the other jurisdictions in the area as well with our outreach events. And a special thank you to the state of Arizona. Erin has been wonderful to have on our meetings, and she's really good at wrapping it up and summarizing what us engineers are hard to, pinpoint. We like to go into too much detail sometimes, and it's nice to have Erin at the end of our presentation wrapping it all up. And thanks again to Gus Myers at the town of Marana, and also Nalo Nalavale at Suarita. Am I not pronouncing that right? Does anybody know how to pronounce that correctly?
Gallo Vale.
Yeah, I think he pronounces it Nalo. But
yeah, he does.
yeah, so we really like to work with our neighboring jurisdictions, and we are available for floodplain questions. You can email us or call us, and we hope that we can help you further if you have specific questions. Again, this presentation will be repeated next week on May 25th. If you'd like to join that meeting, go to the City of Tucson Floodplain administration website, and you will see the link to that meeting. And that wraps up our meeting. We're going to be ending the meeting a little bit early. If anybody has any other further questions, please let us know or contact us individually. Any other questions? Oh, I see E.D. Lohman from FEMA is saying, awesome presentation, everyone. Great job. Congratulations, Pima County, on your new CRS class. Great news. Thank you for inviting me. Yes, special congratulations again to CRS coordinator Greg Sachs at the Pima County Regional Flood Control District, and with this extra help from, of course, Joe Cafari. And good night, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you for putting this on, Elizabeth. Good job.